My guest today on It's a Lawyer's Life is Zimran Samuel from Doughty Street Chambers. Welcome, Zimran.
Thank you so much, Raina. It's a pleasure to have you at Doughty Street Chambers today. Welcome. And can I say it's a huge privilege to be interviewed by It's a Lawyer's Life, having seen the way that the online subscription has evolved and seen your online Twitter followers evolve as well. And it's great to be able to see that organisation go from strength to strength.
Oh, thank you, Zimran. And of course, we're not strangers because you and I did share a chambers at one time.
We did, yes.
And you were there at the beginning of It's a Lawyer's Life, I think.
Absolutely. I remember when it was first hatched as one of your ideas in the basement of 42 Bedford Row, and has grown into the great success that it is today.
Thank you, Zimran. Now, Zimran has a wide-ranging practice, including care proceedings, international relocation, child abduction, radicalisation cases, female genital mutilation, and international human rights. A very wide bag, Zimran. How do you manage such different areas?
Well, of course, you can't do all of that at the same time. I'm fortunate that I can split my diary in a way that you can manage your workload in a way that's realistic. Inevitably, there's a high degree of cross-fertilisation amongst some of those areas. For example, forced marriage and child abduction often involve similar considerations before the court. But managing it is just about managing your diary, and we're fortunate here at Doughty Street to have great clerks that allow me to do that.
Okay. Now, we'll look at some of those areas in a moment, but before you came to the bar, you did something which sounds impossibly glamorous if you're at Luton Magistrates Court, for example, and that is you worked at the United Nations in New York. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've had various roles over the years assisting with the various UN bodies, but prior to coming to the bar I started off interning at the Office of Legal Affairs, which is the legal office of the UN in New York, in Manhattan. And as part of that, there's a sub-office called the Codification Division where I was based, helping to carry out research from comments that are made that are relevant to legal advice that the Secretary-General needs to receive at the Codification Division. So a variety of interesting work, but that was initially started as a 6-month internship and then evolved later into different work.
And what kind of a place is the United Nations to actually work in and be part of?
Well, I found it to be a very pleasant place to work, particularly at the time I was quite junior. It was a very welcoming place. There's a lot that's said about its bureaucracy, and that's absolutely true, but it's also a privilege to work there and see history being made, see world leaders come together, see negotiations being thrashed out. At the time that I started my work there, it was around 2003, so the Iraq war was still quite fresh. There was a lot of distrust about what the UN was all about, and whether there was still a point in having such an institution. What I found as a junior lawyer was a different side of the picture, which is the great work that organisation does regularly, but perhaps that doesn't make the news for whatever reason. Perhaps it's not as interesting. So I guess for me it restored my faith in that institution to some degree.
Now, with the cases that you currently do, there is a large international element to many of them. What key differences would you say there are between work with an international element and the more local cases?
Well, most of my practice comprises children law, and in respect of that, in some ways, there is no difference at all, because as a lawyer, the skills that you use are exactly the same, and you're inevitably either arguing for parents or for children, or trying to effectively prosecute a case for a local authority. But what is different is the knowledge that you need for the international aspects of treaties that might be relevant, regulations from the European Union which may be relevant, having a good knowledge of the jurisdiction of the High Court, which has the powers to make orders which perhaps are less known outside London and to district judges and circuit judges, and having a variety of arguments that you can advance before the court, and having a knowledge of those arguments in that context of those regulations is important. But other than that, the basic skills I think needed as a lawyer in domestic children work and international are largely the same.
How much contact, if any, do you have with lawyers from other countries in that international work?
Well, we have a lot of contact. I would say in about 50% of my international work, there is a large amount of contact with lawyers from other jurisdictions. That happens for a variety of different reasons. It might be that a child has already been abducted and you're trying to repatriate a child to this country, so you need to liaise with a foreign lawyer. Or it might be that a foreign lawyer is giving evidence within this court, in the courts in this country, and therefore you come to know that lawyer in that context. Or it might be that you're in fact instructed abroad and you have to go abroad to give advice in a foreign case, and then you meet the legal teams that you need to talk to be able to advance your case there.
Now, you're best placed perhaps to compare our legal system with that of some of the other countries that you've had involvement with. How does it compare? In countries that I've worked in this year, it's actually sometimes quite similar. For example, I've had the privilege of working in the United States, which has a large degree of similarity in terms of some of its child care procedures, but also huge differences as well in terms of the emphasis they have on certain aspects of the written constitution. I guess I come across and brush across those countries, but I'm not an expert within those countries, so I can't fully compare how one is better or worse than another. But what one does find as you travel to different countries and are able to do different work from different jurisdictions is get an idea of the high respect that people still have for the English bar and the English legal system generally. And I guess that may be a reflection of the independence of our judiciary, our emphasis on the rule of law, and the maturity that we have within the current system here. So that's definitely something that I've noticed in my work abroad. That's really good to hear. Now, one of your areas is FGM, and I wanted to ask you about that because you not only undertake cases, but you've also given talks around the world, I think, about that. I think the last time we spoke you were in Australia, is that right? So tell me a little bit about that.
So female genital mutilation is, in my view, a deeply entrenched cultural practice, which is a human rights abuse. And I've come up to that subject from that angle. That's my view. I have had the privilege of working on the legislation in this country, which introduced reforms to assist with the problem that many campaigners highlighted, which is that we've never had a successful prosecution, and that even in the family courts this issue was not really being advanced that much until the last few years where the legislation has kicked in. So that's the work I do. I haven't really spoken abroad about the issue, but I have been able to assist foreign jurisdictions by advising them based on the experience of this jurisdiction, and that's partly what I was doing in Australia.
Now, as a lawyer, you know that we often get asked, how can you represent a murderer or a rapist when you know what they've done? And in this particular area, which is so controversial, how do you maintain your professionalism when you're faced with something that you find so difficult to deal with?
I think, again, as you've mentioned already, Raina, it's no different to any other human rights abuse. Your job as a lawyer in the courtroom, you are not a campaigner, and your job is to advance your brief. Having said that, if I'm representing somebody that may be carrying out female genital mutilation or has carried out the practice, then I think they need a lawyer, and frankly they need the legal advice. They need to know that it's illegal. They need to be signposted towards the right organisations to be able to offer a degree of education or re-education. So I don't personally feel there's a conflict between my campaign work and my representing people in court.
And that leads me on to the human rights work that you do. It's very much in the news. There's a big debate about the Human Rights Act. What for you as a lawyer is the importance of this work? Why do we need human rights cases? Why do we need the legislation?
Well, various people will give you different answers. My view is that human rights at its very core is about human dignity, it's about compassion, and that translates into various different things across different disciplines of law. For me, I represent children and also various other individuals within Child Act proceedings, and also mental health clients. and those in categories of individuals, children and those suffering from mental health problems are, to my mind, some of the most vulnerable people in society. And so that's what human rights and the importance of human rights legislation and case work mean for me in this country. But obviously it means different things for different people in different areas, and we're very fortunate to be here at Doughty Street, where we have colleagues doing this work internationally and domestically across a range of disciplines which I'm not working in, including, for example, immigration law and criminal law and aspects of public law and judicial review.
Now, we've talked about a lot of serious things, Zimran, but I know that you're a fun guy. How do you relax?
So I relax when I can. I play the blues guitar. So
Wow.
that's one of the passions I've had for a number of years. Picked up my first guitar when I was 7 years old, and I've been trying to play ever since. I don't play in a band
Right.
anymore, although that was always my fallback plan, that if this job didn't work out, that's the type of thing I'd like to try and do full time. But at the moment I play by myself, and that sounds awfully lonely and not fun, but actually when you've been at court and you need to do something completely different and switch off, for me that's a great way to relax.
And one of the great things about you is you're very sociable. And I wanted to ask you, what tips would you give about what is good networking?
Well, being sociable, or particularly networking, I think has become a word that's synonymous with you have to go to a particular event with a name tag on and target certain people and network. So it's almost become something, I think, unattractive to do it systematically. For me, I think that effective networking, if you like, happens naturally or organically. If you're interested in something or an area of work, you will automatically meet people who are like-minded that also equally want to meet you, regardless of you being desperate to give them your business card at a conference. So for me, I've been very fortunate to meet my heroes and work with people that I'm excited to work with, but it's happened naturally as opposed to me being a professional networker.
And you also have a great personal style, if I may say. How would you describe your look when you go into court? Because people have a view of what a barrister should look like. And what's your opinion?
What should a barrister look like? I think formally there are supposed to be some rules about it. We dress quite conservatively. The men wear suits which are usually quite dark black or dark grey. And for what I remember, it wasn't that long ago that women for the first time were given the right to wear trousers.
Yes.
So we're still quite a conservative profession, but I think that outside the rules, in reality, things have become a lot more liberal, still within reason. For me, the headline point is in court, a barrister should A, look smart,
Yes.
and B, feel comfortable. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of colour, but it's still, you do not want to distract away from your arguments that you're trying to advance before a judge. As long as you feel comfortable in yourself and you're confident, then and you're smart, then those are the two most important things.
Now, you've travelled a lot. As I said, you do give talks at international conferences. What's your favourite city and why?
It's a really difficult question, but probably Lahore. I love Lahore for a number of different
Lahore
reasons.
in Pakistan.
Lahore in Pakistan. Partly because of the food, and I love the people, but the food is to absolutely die for.
That's a good reason.
And equally, if I'm allowed to pick two, I also have a huge affection for Istanbul. Again, the food, the vibrancy of the city, and the architecture. It's somewhere I'd love to go back to when I next have the opportunity.
Now, one of the questions that I like to ask is, people talk about successes, but we all make big mistakes, or sometimes small mistakes, or a series of mistakes. Is there anything that you remember particularly about your time in court that you've been embarrassed by?
Well, there is no one big headline story, luckily yet, where I have massively embarrassed myself. But as still being a relatively junior barrister, we make mistakes all the time, and have to correct ourselves all the time and learn all the time. So lots of mini embarrassments and mini learning points, but no, luckily still yet to date, no massive embarrassment just yet.
And finally, Zimran, if a film was made of your life, what do you think the title would be?
I think that has to be given the award for your cheesiest question, Raina. I don't know what a film about my life would be called, and I guess it's still, I hope, too early to say my life. I'm still very much here and living my life. And I'd like to think that it's for other people to judge, but I wonder if it would be, rather than a film, maybe a series,
Okay.
like one of the box sets.
Okay.
And each series would be what one we experience in the lives of our clients, where we rush in and out of cases and are expected to deal with things which are extremely sensitive for people, and then the next day move on to something equally sensitive for somebody completely different, and sometimes forget what we've been doing the previous day. So I like to think about my life as a series of documentaries or movies, as opposed to one big film. What it's going to be called, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, I can say one thing, whether it's a series or a film, it would be very exciting. Zimran Samuel, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for speaking to me.